Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
He's an ex-lieutenant from the Charleston Police Department. During his career, his officers got in a foot pursuit. He went to back them up. He got into a jackpot with his department, alleging that he covered up their use of force. He's here to talk all about it on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Contact is from great state of South Carolina. We have Arthur Rusty Myers on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. He is a deputy police chief from the University Police Department, which we'll talk about in a few moments. He is an ex-police lieutenant, and I'll explain the difference for the Charleston Police Department and why he got jacked up and jammed up and lost his job. All that stuff's going to be talking about a little bit later on. He's the author of the book, Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. That's Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. Rusty, thanks for your service, and thanks for talking about it on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Both very much appreciated. First of all, it's... there is a happy ending, and I want people to understand it right away. There is a happy ending in your story. It's not all bad. It's not all doom and gloom, but you went through some dark times, didn't you?
I did, and the reason that happy ending is there, the reason I wrote this book is I want officers that go through something similar to realize that the sun's going to rise. They'll get through it, but it's not fun.
No, it's not fun.
And hopefully by writing the book, they'll have a chance to kind of anticipate some of the stuff that hit me by surprise and understand what's happening to them mentally and physically and emotionally as they go through something bad.
I want to explain the hierarchy that I have, and there's very few things I correct people about when it comes to policing. There is ex-police, there's former police, and retired police. I'm retired, and when someone calls me ex, I'm like, no. Ex means that you usually resigned or were fired, and there's a black mark on, let's just say, the reason why you left the agency. There's former that people left for whatever reason, for whatever reason, but they left in good standing with the agency. How would you consider yourself, ex or former?
I was a former lieutenant with the Charleston Police Department, but I am now a deputy chief with another department.
Isn't it funny? And by the way, there's a little ha-ha in here because he did the detour with another agency we'll talk about in a few moments. Before we get into your story, what happened, Arthur, let's talk about your career. When did you start, and you're a deputy chief now? I
started in 1994 with the Charleston Police Department and rose through the ranks there. Left briefly, went to the FBI, got hurt, was out for about a year or two, and came back to law enforcement at the city of Charleston, where I made corporal and then patrol sergeant. For several years, I was the interdiction sergeant in one of the teams, which was really a lot of fun. I'd never done interdiction before, so it was a new experience for me, but I had good guys who could teach the sergeant what to do. And I wasn't stupid enough to tell them they were wrong, so right. I had a good time.
I love being a sergeant. I'm a retired Baltimore police sergeant, and I loved being a sergeant because that's, and I don't know about your agency, but that's where all the sergeants run the department.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where it was. And after a couple of years as a sergeant, I was promoted to lieutenant, took over for a year's command duty, which is basically the chief on midnight shift. After that, I moved to a team command, which is a patrol command. So I spent my entire career in patrol, which is kind of unusual. We only had, I think, 2 command staff members that spent their whole career in patrol.
And they always say that's the backbone of every agency, and it's the one that gets,
absolutely,
the short end of the stick all the time.
Well, my goal was usually to stay away from the station as much as possible. So
yeah, well, that's a safe goal. And by the way, I'm not saying this sarcastically, but you did not accomplish that goal.
No. I actually, after several years as a team commander, the chief of police put out like a wish list. Where would you like to go? He was going to do a little move. And I kind of put training on there as a joke, thinking they would never put me in training. And, the chief called me on that and put me in training. Actually, most of my team got transferred. And one of the best compliments I've ever received as a law enforcement officer was chief apologizing for breaking up my team, because I had 6 of my 8 sergeants transferred. And he said, but that's where we're building our leaders.
Right.
And that was a huge compliment coming from him.
And by the way,
went to training.
Charleston has a good reputation. It may not have had it in the 70s and 80s, but it's got a good reputation nationally. And I love that city, by the way.
I still got a lot of good friends at CPD, so I agree.
And by the way, I got a figure for Radio Face the Match, and I love the food of Charleston. I'll just say that point blank. I love the food.
If you ever come here for training, you will not leave as light as you arrived.
So
it is physically impossible.
Is it fair to say that most police careers, you go through the good, the bad, and the ugly? What's the old Western? Good, the bad, and the ugly. And there, you had your share of ugly, which we'll talk about. But was there a lot of good in your job?
Oh, there was tons of it. When I was running the team, that was a lot of fun. I still had the interdiction squad under me, so I'd go out and ride with them once a week at least, sometimes twice. My wife got aggravated because Friday night would come around and she'd want to know if she was getting taken to dinner or if I was going to go, quote unquote, play with my people.
Right.
And I like to go play on Friday nights. So every now and then I had to take one to take her out to dinner. But it was a lot of fun. When I went to the training office, that was sort of a new idea for me because I've never been in the building before, been doing that. But I looked at it and said, this is a position where I can really leave a mark on how we train our officers and what they're doing and how they're doing it, and make sure they do the job right. And I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun in training. We had a lot of new initiatives the chief was on, and it was a lot of fun to kind of make this come to life. You
came into policing, you started your career in 94, I retired in 92, and when I retired, we didn't have peer support, we didn't have critical incident stuff, we didn't have any of that stuff. It was, lick your wounds, your Baltimore police, suck it up, buttercup, do your job. That's the way things
Absolutely.
work. A lot of changes have happened, and they're good, but some of them are not so good. Even though the intentions are good, some are not so good.
Yeah. And I really was kind of that same generation, just suck it up and deal with it for most of my career, until it exploded. And then I became the officer we warned people to look out for.
Right.
The one that's in danger of taking their life. And I sat through all the same classes, mind armor and mental resiliency, and I did what most good people do and most officers do in those classes, which was I played on my phone. But I remembered enough that when the day came, I realized I was checking all the boxes. And that's when I got help. And when I got back into the uniform, I went to Somerville PD and immediately told them I want peer support. I want to do peer support. I want to help people get through what I just went through.
And that in itself is amazing.
That's just become,
Back in my day, and I love saying that. Back in my day, we didn't have, when really bad calls happened, we went to a parking lot and had a case of beer. That's what we did. We talked amongst ourselves. And there's a lot of good stuff, but for me, that alcohol turned into a problem. But a lot of cops, that's all they got.
Well, and truthfully, that's kind of where I was. I was never a drinker. But when I went through this, I realized, when you're going through something you don't have answers to, it gets into a loop in your head, and the loop just goes around and around. What did I do? Why am I here? What am I doing? What's going on? And none of those answers are forthcoming fast.
No, and they're also
alcohol was a way to turn off my brain.
That's
so
exactly
I got to where
right.
I knew exactly how much to drink.
We're talking with Arthur Rusty Myers. He's a deputy police chief at a college in South Carolina, and he is author of the book "Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase." This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to talk about what happened in a few moments. I promise you, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Look for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on YouTube.com. And be sure to subscribe. Like everything we do, it is free. Look for and subscribe to Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on YouTube for great police videos and episodes of the podcast.
Return conversation with Arthur Rusty Myers on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. He is a deputy police chief at a college in South Carolina. He is a former Charleston Police Department lieutenant. We'll talk about former in a few moments. And he's author of the book, Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. That's Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. Arthur, can I call you Rusty?
Absolutely, please do.
By the way, Rusty is the kind of guy that I went through some dark days in my policing career. You went through some dark days as well. And it's not because of anything you did. I don't know your case, but I know enough of your case that you didn't do anything wrong, but that didn't stop them from coming after you, did it?
No, not at all.
Did you ever think you'd be in a position where you would be the so-called bad guy?
No, and it's a shock. You know, when you get a call from another agency, you normally answer the phone, "Hey, brother, what's going on? What you need?" But now you're in a position where you're the suspect, and you can't have that default anymore. I've got to talk to my attorney first.
And that's the
new way of thinking.
So, and by the way, as a sergeant, I told my officers all the time, you don't talk to anyone until you talk to an attorney. Period. End of story. It's a basic human right, and that's what you got to do. And I didn't find myself in a look, I'm a good guy. I got nothing to hide.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were going through all my stuff, I was adamant that I wanted to testify. Adamant with my attorney that I wanted to testify. And he kept saying, nope. You got the documentation. It speaks for itself. You don't need to say a word. They'll twist something you said and they'll get you. And I finally shut up and listened to the advice.
Right. Which is good advice, by the way. That was what he was
telling me.
Let's talk briefly about what happened. So it sounds really complicated, and I'd love to say it doesn't happen often, but it does.
Well, it was basically July 1st. It was about 100 degrees that day, 98, I think. And we had a call for a suspicious person peeking in backyards and looking in cars. So the officers responded, and this actually happened on Rainbow Road, downtown Charleston. The officers accosted the guy. He ran, tried to get into a vehicle in traffic, which would be a carjacking. They got into a foot pursuit, and a rookie officer outran his FTO. Surprise. And the rookie officer caught him behind a house and got into a fight with him and was unable to really tell us where he was because he was pretty new on the force. So we were all responding. I'd been sitting in my office, but now I'm headed that way. I got an officer in a fight. And we're all headed to find him. He ends up falling on the garden rake, which stabbed him in the arm and the hand, and it literally stuck to him. So when the guy got up to run, he was unable to follow because he was dealing with trying to get the rake out of his arm.
Right.
So by the time we get there, we haven't seen the guy in a while. I'm kind of like, well, if he's gone to ground, I don't know where he's at. This is probably over. And I start dealing with my officer because he's bleeding. That's my main concern. We're at the ambulance getting him looked at, and all of a sudden a citizen says, "Hey, are y'all looking for that guy? I think he went in that house right there." And we're like, "That house right there?" So we go to the door. It's locked. And about that time, the homeowner comes home and says, "I didn't lock my door. I just went to the store. I just walked down the street." So she opens the door, and she's screaming about her animals. She's worried about her pets. I get that. But she runs in, not listening to us. The officers run in behind her. They pass a closet door going upstairs. He was in the closet, so he comes running out. So now it's also a burglary. So now we're in a second foot pursuit with him. And me and my sergeant walk around the corner just as the officers are coming out the door following him. So we start running as well. He ends up going behind the house. We lost sight of the officers for about 10 or 12 seconds when we couldn't figure out which house they'd gone behind. Then we found him. He went behind the house, slipped on some pea gravel, which is a little quarter-inch rock that had been freshly laid in the driveway. And we get back there. The three officers are on top. The sergeant jumps in. I'm kind of like, well, there's 4 of them on him. We don't really need any more. They're struggling to get him in handcuffs. He's fighting, cussing, spitting, doing all his, the typical, I don't want to lose a foot pursuit and go to jail type stuff. And so I kind of stand back thinking, okay, I'll get this on body camera. We're behind the house. It's fence around it. This guy could say we did anything. We'd been through the Slager shooting and all here in Charleston. So we were very aware of the optics of the situation. So I kind of stand back, and one of the officers goes to stand up, and as he's standing up, he slaps the guy in the back of the head. And I kind of caught out the corner of my eye because at this point I had another officer hurt that's screaming for EMS. So I'm going to my radio on my shoulder, and I see it, and I'm like, well, I got to ask why he did that because I don't know why. But that was it. It was like a grandma slapping you in the back of the head when you get too loud in church type of thing. So he gets up, and he's just kind of standing there. And the guy's screaming about how hot the rocks are because now he's in cuffs. And I'm like, okay, get him up off the rocks. The rocks are hot. No big deal. We walk away from the scene. He gets checked by EMS. He's got some scratches and boo-boos, but nothing serious. In the meantime, I got one officer already en route to the hospital. I got to go figure out what's going on with the other officer, and that's what I'm thinking. In my mind, this is over. It's all, we got the body cam. Mine's the only one that really stayed on. The others all came off in the struggle. So I knew when I stepped back that I was going to have the only body cam that was really going to show the whole thing. And went back, stopped by the office to download the body cam. Downloaded it on my detective's computer, watched it one time on the 11-inch screen, was looking for the slap, and I saw it, and I was like, okay, I got to make sure I ask why he did that because I'm not really sure.
Right.
And as I was going to the hospital, he called on the phone. I answered it, and we talked for like 20 seconds, and I was like, hey, what'd you slap him in the head for? He goes, oh, the guy's been spitting. I thought he was going to spit on me. Okay, well, that's a felony in South Carolina. And if he'd already been spitting, then it made perfect sense. So handled that. The officers did their use of force that night. I came in the next day, reviewed the use of forces. They were okay. I was like, all right, this is not that big of a thing. And that was kind of it. I couldn't find the body camera footage. And eventually, I think we finally figured out my body camera had been assigned to a different officer. It was the first one I had downloaded, and I downloaded on a different computer. So it's lost in cyberland. So
right.
I sent a couple of emails to IT saying, hey, I need to read this video, get it back to me, which they never did. And this is the 4th of July week, so there's a lot of people off, including a lot of the IT guys are off. So finally, Friday morning, I'm sitting there, and I'm like, look, I need to submit this thing. I don't want somebody to think we're hiding the fact that he slapped him back of the head. Because I even told the officer, I said, I might want to look at it, but if he was spitting, that's no big deal. It's totally legit. So Friday comes around, I can't get the video up. I'm just like, I'm just going to go ahead and submit this. Well, about an hour later, the sergeant walks in and says, hey, they sent the officer home. I'm like, for what? And he's like, I don't know. And I thought, oh, my God, this guy's gotten a DUI or something. What's going on? It didn't even occur to me at the first that it was anything to do with the foot pursuit.
Right.
And later that day, I figured out that's what it was. And I called Internal Affairs. I'm like, hey, check my body camera. My body camera's got the whole thing on it. Everything's right there. It's in my report. Everything that happened, the reasoning for it, all that's right there in the report. Do you need me to come give a statement? And they were like, no. Okay, well, all right. I guess we're going home. And I talked to the officer briefly that night because you can't talk about the case, obviously, but I just checking on him.
Right.
And then over the weekend, things just started blowing up and started hearing stuff that didn't sound like the foot pursuit I saw. But anyway,
Let's take a break on the note. Return to what happened when you got back. We're talking with Arthur Rusty Myers. He is a deputy police chief in South Carolina at a university. He was a former Charleston, South Carolina police officer, police lieutenant, and he got jacked up in a foot pursuit. We'll talk more about that in a few moments. He's authored the book, Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. It's Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere, I promise you. We'll be right back.
Be sure to download the free Clubhouse app. It's like having your own talk radio station on your phone. And best of all, it is free. Be sure to follow John J. Wiley at LET Radio Show and look for major announcements. That's right, the Clubhouse app is free. And be sure to follow him for major announcements. That's John J. Wiley or at LET Radio Show. Did I mention that it is free?
Return conversation with Arthur Rusty Myers on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. He's Deputy Chief Police Department at a university in South Carolina, and he was a former Charleston Police Department lieutenant. He got jacked up on a foot pursuit, which will return that conversation in a few moments. He's authored the book, Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. It's Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. You were policing, obviously, during an era of body cameras. We didn't have them when I started. Nowadays, I wouldn't want to do the job without one, but they don't project the entire scene as a way you see it, do they?
No. They're limited in what they catch. And when I finally went to my IA interview, after they told me twice they didn't want to interview me, I went back for an interview. And we sat there and we watched the body cam footage. I told them what, my use of force report said. I talked about the slap to the back of the guy's head. The guy, the officer said the guy was spitting. It's really, you can't really tell what he's doing on the video, but it wasn't that big of a strike to begin with.
Right.
And then as we're watching it, I kind of pan back, I guess, for lack of a better term, and you see his knees moving. And they asked me then, well, what's he doing with his knees? And I was like, oh, he was like making a little pile of rocks in the gravel. I don't know why. I guess it's just, working off the adrenaline, a couple of good adrenaline dumps.
Uh-huh.
And that was the only question they asked me about that. And kind of put it off and said, all right, well, that's it. And cleared up, went back to my office and started my day. And then about 2 hours later, I got a call that I was being placed on administrative leave. I needed to bring my truck to the station. I needed to find a ride home. And I was like, for what? For what? Everything is on paper. Everything's in the video. What are you talking about? And he's, I can't talk about it right now. So they sent me home. And that's a shock that police officers aren't ready for.
No, and I would just say this. I happen to know a little bit about the situation. A lot of this is politically motivated.
I think so, yeah. But so I get home that night, and I still had my FOP insurance, which if you don't have something to insure you as a cop, please get it. Yeah. Save my house. I contacted the best attorney around, which is the one everybody said go to. So I went to him, sent him an email about 7:30 that night, not expecting an answer. At 9 o'clock, I got an answer saying, I'll see you in the office tomorrow morning at 9. So you go in the next morning, I start talking to him, like, look, I volunteered to take a polygraph. I don't know what else I can do. I didn't do anything. I don't understand what's going on. And he looked at me and he says, are they going criminal? And it shocked me. I was like, criminal for what? He's like, I just know how these things go.
Right.
And you need to be prepared. And I was like, okay, well, I don't think that's it. I think this is all just a misunderstanding of some sort. And then I go back. I'm at home for 2 weeks. No phone calls from the office, no nothing, no other interviews are asked for, nothing. I'm just on admin leave. I'm sitting at home. And then about 2 weeks later, I get a call from a SLED detective. And I start talking to him like cops call the cops, And then about halfway, 5 minutes in, I'm like, well, wait a second now. I'm a suspect here. And he tells me we've been asked to come in and look at a use of force and a possible cover-up. And I'm like, cover-up? It's on my body cam. How could it be a cover-up? It's in my report. So then I realized, I'm like, wait a second, I got to talk to my attorney before I get an interview with you. So, and then he's like, oh, you got an attorney? I tell him I got Andy Savage. He's like, Andy ain't gonna let you talk to me. So this conversation didn't happen. I didn't know you had an attorney. Okay, fine. So SLED begins an investigation. No follow-up or anything for about 2.5, 3 months. From the station, from SLED, nothing. And then finally the report comes out, and in the SLED report it says Lieutenant Myers wrote a detailed report of his observations. He doesn't have any claims that I covered up anything or that I didn't do anything. And I'm thinking, okay, well, there you go. It's cleared. It's over. So I wait a couple of days. I call IA, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, oh, well, we just started the IA investigation. I'm like, well, SLED cleared me. What's there to investigate at this point? But anyway, 141 days I went without a phone call from my police department. 141 days. And then they call and they put me on leave without pay, which I know what that means. It means something's bad. So I finally get called in a week later to the deputy chief's office, and I don't even know what the charges are at this point. I don't have any idea what the investigation is about. And she tells me, why didn't you stop him from kicking the rocks? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Deputy Chief, that never happened. Well, it did. And you're charged with failure to intervene because the slap I couldn't have stopped. But the fact that he kicked rocks on the guy afterwards that they had assumed from the movement of his knees became the holy grail for them. That was, you didn't stop that. You didn't intervene in it. You didn't report it. And I'm just like, but it didn't happen. How do I prove to you that it didn't happen? The camera sees his knees move, but I was standing there. And there's 3 officers on top of this guy. So if he kicked rocks at the suspect, who else was he kicking rocks at? Well, he would have hit the officers. No one else reports it. The suspect doesn't even. When SLED finally interviews the suspect, he doesn't even know what he's there for. He doesn't know who hit him in the head, or daddy got hit in the head, or that. And then he never mentions the rocks being kicked. So that becomes the issue. They fire me for the officer kicking rocks and me not reporting it.
So they said that you, and I'm using the terminology, you submitted a false report and you covered up for this officer.
Right.
when you didn't do that at all.
No.
And by the way, and we're talking about a visual platform, the body cam. I can't see it, but the kicking of the rocks, did that not show up in the video?
No. All you see is his knees move. There's no rocks. There's no dust from the pea gravel kicking up.
Well, isn't it a bit of a stretch between you and me to go from seeing his knees move to kicking rocks?
Well, yeah. Ultimately, I don't really understand where that came from. The officer, in his internal affairs interview, it got very confrontational, apparently. And at some point, he actually said he honestly doesn't remember what he did to this day. Because
and that's not unusual. As a sergeant lieutenant, you get the heat of the moment, you get the adrenaline dump, you get all that stuff. Most officers don't even know. Those involved in shootings couldn't even tell you how many shots they fired.
Right, and he has no idea. So at one point in the interview, he actually says, well, I'll tell you guys the worst case. The worst case is maybe I kick some rocks. Well, that's not what he did. That's him just saying the worst case is maybe that's what I did, but I was the one standing back watching the whole thing.
Here's
and
what I get.
Asking me, why didn't you pull him away? Why didn't you pull him? I was like, because he wouldn't do anything. He's just standing there.
And by the way, this is something I hear quite often, especially on social media. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page, people are saying, if there's 99 good cops, they cover one bad cop, they're all bad cops. What the heck are you talking about? I never saw corruption in my police career, and we wouldn't tolerate it.
No, and I've taken 11 badges in my career, and I don't regret any of them. They all deserve to lose it.
That's the thing about it, and let's be honest. Let's call it what it is. There's really no evidence, and police are very much evidence-driven. It's speculation. We can have rumors, we can have opinions, we can have all kinds of things, but there's no evidence to support a claim it didn't happen.
Right. How do I prove something that didn't happen? There's no way for me to prove that. I'm sort of stuck.
But then you can't disprove
and
it. That's the other thing.
When this got before a court that was worried about evidence, it went away because
that's the point.
They were literally told, you can't say that, you can't see it, there's no evidence that happened.
So the end result was you lost your job because they thought you covered and you did false report. You covered for this use of force, which was imaginary.
Yeah.
And you mentioned going to court.
They tried to take my certification for the false report, so I had to defend my certification, and that's when it actually got in front of a court that demanded evidence.
Okay.
And at that point, there was none. So the whole rock kicking thing went away.
So that was where the court explanation came. It wasn't criminal court. It was a tribunal for your state certification.
Yeah, the Law Enforcement Training Council. So it's actually 9 people, the head of SLED, the Attorney General, and 7 police chiefs that sit on that board.
Here's the reality. We got a break coming up very quickly. Did you ever think that you would be in this position, ever?
No, absolutely not.
And by the way, and I would say this, most crooked cops, bent cops, or whatever terminology you want to use, which I don't know if they really exist, have an idea that this is coming. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Return our conversation with Arthur Rusty Myers in a few moments. He's a deputy police chief at a university in South Carolina. He was a former Charleston Police Department lieutenant. He lost his job, which he's returning the conversation in a moment. He's also authored the book Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. That's Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. I'm going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Someone asked, what's the catch? What's the cost? There is no cost for anything on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast website, letradio.com. letradio.com. Again, that's letradio.com.
Return a conversation with Arthur Rusty Myers. He is a deputy police chief for a university in South Carolina Police Department, and he is a former Charleston Police Department lieutenant. He's authored the book Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. That's Tattered When the Blue Line Phrase. And to do a Reader's Digest condensed version, he got jacked up and charged with false report, allegedly covering up a use of force by one of his subordinate officers, which didn't happen. There's no evidence of that. And when we went to break, you're trying to get your certification back. Eventually you did.
Yeah, the whole process that I went through took about 2 years because of COVID. And I ended up back in front of the Law Enforcement Training Council for the final hearing. And, my attorney had prepared me to lose the whole time we were on the ride up there. We rode together. My attorney was a former police officer, which I selected intentionally because I knew he would get the down low. And we got up there, and the first person to speak after the presentation was the attorney general. And he just said, this is not misconduct. Why are we here? And I sat up, and, I don't know who was more excited, me or my attorney. Me because I won a full no misconduct, or him because he got me in a full no misconduct. So I had a job interview literally the next day, and went to work with the Somerville Police Department. And at Somerville, within about 3 months, I guess, I became their internal affairs inspector. And Chief Wright at Somerville charged me. He stood up in front of everyone, and when I got promoted, and explained my situation and all the stuff I'd been through with the case. And he literally looked at the crowd and said, this man is in this position so that I never do to you what was done to him.
There you go.
And that's the kind of leader that I wanted to work for. And I pretty much assumed I would be there for the rest of my career.
Isn't it ironic
I ran internal affairs my way,
You went from being a street cop to this run-in with internal affairs at Charleston Police Department to being in internal affairs of the Somerville Police Department?
Yeah. That's it's totally ironic, but, sometimes the big guy does things his own way, and God steers you where he wants you. So I ran internal affairs my way. I was given the freedom to do that, and I did my best because I believe cops should not be afraid of internal affairs.
No, they shouldn't.
If your department's running and they're afraid of internal affairs, something's wrong.
Right. The only guys that should be
there to protect them.
The only guys that should be afraid of internal affairs in any department are those bad guys, the ones who do things that they bend laws, they bend rules, they all this other stuff. The vast majority of police I know, and I'll give you an example. I was taught early on, get in trouble doing your job. You're going to make mistakes. Do not get in trouble trying to cover up your job. If you got to use force, document it.
Absolutely. And that was kind of the way that I ran it. It was, my job is 51% protect this department, but it's 49% protect you.
Right.
As an officer.
Right.
And most of the time, those two numbers align to 100%.
When you went through your bad days, Rusty, did this have a profound effect on you mentally? And it's going from being one of the good guys to an outcast is not easy.
And that's really why I wrote the book. The training commander in me said, what can I do to make this 2 years have meaning? And I said, I don't want any officer to have to go through this the way I went through it, which was having no idea what was going on, no idea what's happening, not just with the case, but mentally. I'd never been a drinker. I became one.
Right.
Don't do that, by the way. That's not good.
No, it's not good.
I had a
pouring depressants down your throat to try to not feel depressed is not a good winning combination.
It is not, but it did quiet the loop for a few hours. It would, allow me to relax. And then, my wife, God bless her, dealt with the whole thing, and she went through a lot. And I still to this day don't know everything she went through. I wish I did, but I was only paying attention to me at the time.
Right.
And one day she looked at me as I was working in the yard, and she asked me about lunch, and I yelled at her, and she looked at me and she just said, Rusty Myers, you better do something before you do something stupid. You better call somebody. And I sat there in my yard thinking, what does she know? I've been through all these stupid classes. I know. And then I started remembering the checklist, because even though I was playing on my phone, I remembered the checklist they give you at every class, things to watch out for in your people. And I realized that I checked every box. Yeah. And I got to the one about planning and having a plan, and I realized I had an extensive plan. I knew where I was going to go. I knew what I was going to do. I was going to take hats and put them all around me, and these are the hats I wore in my life. And when I realized how extensive my plan was, it scared me. And I called and got help with a counselor. And, about 3 sessions into counseling, he came out and he's like, what else do you have? What do you dream about? And, I ended up with a PTSI. I had PTSD from the job.
Right.
We had Mother Emanuel, we had the Charleston 9, the firefighters, and in addition to all the other stuff that I had dealt with over the years. And everybody's got a closet or a backpack, and they shove their stuff in there. That PTS stuff gets shoved in there, and one day it explodes. And for me, this potentially career-ending thing is why it all exploded out.
I think that's. I heard the best analogy ever was when you go through the police academy, you graduate, they give you a state-of-the-art backpack, and it's different. It's different depending on where you go through. And every call you handle, you want to throwing a pebble in the backpack. Sometimes those pebbles are big, sometimes they're small. But if you don't find a way to decrease that load, you're going to explode.
And that's what happened with me. With this brought it all out. You know, I'd had a rookie that I had trained that was killed in the line of duty. It was a good friend. Everything that just had built up over the years was blowing out, and it had made me suicidal. And fortunately, my wife stuck with me through the whole thing and was able to yell at me the day she needed to. And I got some help. And, you know, with the phone calls stop, I wasn't ready for that. You know, you've been sent home on admin leave, and all of a sudden your friend list narrows dramatically, very quickly. And then you get this whole talk about how optics are a big deal and all this other stuff. And that's why I wrote Tattered. Tattered's not written from an anger perspective. I discussed the case and my way of looking at the case, but I'm very open about it. If you want to review the files, they're foyable. Go get them. And I wrote the book because I want an officer to be prepared for what they're going to go through mentally, so they don't make some of the mistakes I made. I mean, I didn't make the mistake of taking my own life. I could have. You could have made
a lot of us wind up there.
Problem.
I've got to ask you this question. I usually ask that people write the book for cathartic reasons, but the other one is, and it sounds like your case is to put admission to the pain you went through. Yeah,
I would say that's what it is, because I put it off for years. It's been almost 6 years since the incident now. It's a whole new regime at the police department in Charleston, and the new mayor and everything else. So it's a whole different group of people now.
Right, but you're still the same guy, and I got to ask you this. This is neither here nor there. I still sometimes feel like I need to defend myself, even though I didn't do anything wrong. Do you sometimes feel that way?
I do. It's there, and I think it'll probably always be there a little bit. But when you're accused of something that you absolutely didn't do, it's a moral injury. You know, I've got institutional betrayal, moral injuries, all that stuff is real. And it adds to that backpack you were talking about. Right. Those are big rocks when you throw those in the backpack. Well, but I also know that you get suspended a lot of people know what happened.
When you get suspended without pay, that's a big deal. And people, they love to poo-poo this, but when you get suspended and they strip you of your police powers, all that stuff, the badge, the gun, that's a big deal as well.
It is. It's your whole identity disappears in a heartbeat. And every cop, one day in their career, is going to have that happen.
Everybody.
Whether it's because they get in trouble or they retire.
And by the way,
stuff is going to go away.
People, I love what you said, we're going to get in trouble. It's inevitable. If you do police work and you are a good cop, you're going to get in trouble. It's the only ones that are what I call mobile report takers that are the last ones to show up at every call. They never get blood on the uniform. They never show up at the hot stuff's going on. They don't get IID numbers. They get none of that stuff, and they're first ones to get promoted, and they're first ones to charge officers who didn't do anything wrong. Arthur, thanks for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, talking all about it, and thanks for your service. Both very much appreciated. And by the way, don't forget, he has a website. That's rusty-myers.com. That's rusty-myers.com. Spelled MYERS.com. This Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
If you want to be a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, simply contact us. It couldn't be easier. You can send us a message on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show page, or email jay@letradio.com. That's JAY@letradio.com. I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.